for being here. I'm June Waters. Everybody, there's no strangers here, so you all know that, and I can also kind of skip a lot of intro I would do if there were strangers here. So again, Hannah, thank you. We have some, if you have not seen the show, this will surely bring you here. It's right behind me, and every aspect is so beautifully done. So without further ado, the first thing we will see in the presentation is the video that was made. Well, please tell me again, Hannah, who made the original video? What group?
Yeah, so it was made by Testudo. Testudo is an organization that supports artists. They sell artwork through their platform, but they also do writing and videos about artists. And they came to my studio in February of earlier this year to film this video. And yeah, it was a great conversation, and I'm so happy that they made it. It's been really also nice for them to let me use it in other settings and be able to share it. So yeah.
Yeah, really good thing. And Lake George TV contacted you, asked you if you had a video, and you just did. So that's
exactly.
so that will be here. It's great to watch more than once. If you have seen it once, I've enjoyed it several times. And after that, it's just a good thing. And after that, we will go down the list of, helping to do the PowerPoint, and leaving art out was really difficult. So I decided to organize the art as the images were given into legs, suspended, and wall. And that just doesn't cover it. You'll see as we go through, and at the end, some exhibition shots. So it really falls into place with those. So let me begin to share. Oh, where am I here? Oh dear, that's not what I wanted, but it will get me where I want to be, which is strange because, oh, here I am. There we are. So we will start from the beginning.
I think a lot about body language and the way that we communicate with our bodies, with our limbs, and what it means to isolate different gestures or shapes and freeze them in a moment of transformation. We say so much without speaking, and with visual art, for me, it's always been trying to get at something that is hard to verbalize. It's trying to communicate something that you can only really communicate by making or by visualizing or by constructing. We are in my studio, which is in Beacon, New York, in a detached garage behind my home. I make sculptures using primarily recycled textiles and found objects. I source a lot of things from my own life or lives of friends and family to create compound sculptural forms. My work is about trying to capture all of the disparate pieces of being a person. I'm interested in trying to capture certain moods and gestures in my work, and to speak to the body or a certain kind of creature that's in the process of doing something, morphing or changing, kind of catching it in that state. I'm trying to question this idea of flattening or characterizing a person, trying to show that there's so much that we all contain, that they can all coexist together. when I'm in the studio, it's a lot about making visual connections, putting pieces together that you wouldn't necessarily put together, or something that I hadn't necessarily planned out, but once I see them together, they make so much sense. I'm much more engaged when I don't know what's going to happen. I started in this place where I was making these really specific kinds of textile pieces that were in the language of painting. And then they very gradually became these forms that fell off the wall and came onto the floor and started to occupy space. And as they started to do that, I started thinking about armatures and ways that they can hold themselves up or not to kind of create more dynamism in the way that they are in the space. Especially with my freestanding sculptures, there's something about the way you encounter them as a kind of one-to-one relationship in a space. It kind of creates this feeling of almost empathy, or this relationship between you and the work, even though it is kind of a mysterious thing. You do feel like you have this knowledge of it because of the way that it is holding shape, the way that it's standing, its posture. The idea of things in the home, in your life, taking on bodies, taking on personalities, becoming these things that can stand and can emote. There's something in that for me. All of these things coming together aesthetically and literally kind of compounding together to create a new body, a new form that's kind of in the process of coming together. The patchworking that I do kind of speaks to that, juxtaposing different patterns and textures that you wouldn't necessarily put together, like this idea of them clashing. But I find that to be actually really generative. It allows me to do something visual that is hard to communicate verbally, putting all of these visual pieces together and seeing them stitched together. I tend to use a very kind of visible stitch. That is my form of mark making, and I like the idea of it being also a visual element as well as a functional technique that I'm using. There's something about that motion, that movement, that feels just so literal and tangible to me. To have learned this process in the home space from women in my family, it feels really personal and is something that has kind of been this thread that has been in my life since childhood. I like the idea of bringing that in and speaking to those kinds of processes that we learn as children, or things that we learn at home, and how they are just as important as more formal considerations, and that they can be just so visually and materially complex and compelling and meaningful. The idea of these works being created in my studio and living with me, and then going on to find a new home and a new life, feels like this really natural next step for them after they've kind of taken on their forms. The idea of them almost walking out of the studio onto their next life feels really right and kind of poetic to me. Sometimes I think about certain works in my studio that I've exhibited in different places, and then maybe they go to live with a collector, and the idea of these pieces that are created from so many different recycled materials or found objects, things that have already had a life, and then they're coming together in this new way. And then maybe as this new form, they kind of have this new life where they travel and then where they live. It just kind of makes this sense to me, and just feels like, I don't know, they're on this journey or something.
Off we go.
Great. Should I just start talking?
Sure. I said, well, you'll just take it from here. I will mention again that I have legs suspended and walls. an exhibition. So that to anticipate how things are laid out, which they didn't need to be laid out in any organizational fashion whatsoever, because each one speaks for itself. However, as you talk about pieces' personality and their character, I just am so attracted to the things with legs, like Caddy, who looks like she's out of here. Whatever happens next, she's gone with her little hanging off. So please go ahead.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here and for welcoming me. I'm so happy to have my work in this space, and it was kind of nice, the end of the video talking about thinking about my works as on this journey, and especially these ones that have feet, like they're literally walking out of my studio, walking into the courthouse gallery. It's just so nice to think of them all there and to see you, June, with them behind you. So yeah, I can go through and just say some things about my work generally, and then also about some specific pieces. And yeah, I think the idea of using legs in my work, it is both kind of a practical thing when I was thinking about making freestanding sculptures, because as I said in the video, I started more making things that were kind of in the language of painting. They were more frontal, they mostly were on the wall, and then I kind of gradually brought them out into the room and into the space. And there was just something more dynamic to me about the idea of them standing rather than just kind of laying. And sometimes I still play around with the idea of whether or not they are standing or falling or getting up or whatever kind of state they're in. But it felt like this visual thing that I wanted to accomplish, the dynamism of kind of these small legs holding up these larger forms, but also like thematically thinking about how we are all on, holding up ourselves and holding on to all of the things that we're carrying around with us all the time. And it just felt like it made this sense to me. And I think the way that you relate to them in the space it is kind of as this one-to-one thing. Something I really like about sculpture is I feel like it gives you this feeling of there's a thing you're encountering in space, and it's like a what is it kind of feeling. And I get a lot of questions from people too when they see my work. They want to say, what is it? And I think that is kind of the question, but it's also, there's not really an answer to it. It's a multitudinous multi-part answer, because I'm kind of putting the question back to you, like, what is it to you? What does it make you feel or think about? And does it have to be one thing? Can it be multiple things at the same time? So now I'm just kind of rambling, but
so the conversation can work from each piece.
Yeah, sure.
When you want to move on.
Sure. So I'll say, yeah, because I think part of it too, it's interesting. All my work, it's all connected. It comes from similar places. So sometimes when I'm talking, it's like I kind of zoom out into these bigger things that connect them all together. But specifically with this piece, I also did not necessarily intend to display it the way that I did in the show, where it's kind of walking right off the pedestal. It was kind of a happy accident, but now I'm so excited about it, because I often, especially because I'm interested in standing works and works that can hold themselves up, I think I often kind of go back and forth on the idea of pedestals, because I wonder if I'm considering them enough. I mean, they're helpful to be able to kind of view things at a certain height, but sometimes I feel like I'm not as excited about them. So this felt like a good way for me to kind of like engage with the pedestal as an idea, as well as like a functional thing. And this piece has ceramic feet, which is something that I've also been exploring more recently, incorporating elements of ceramic in my work. And the idea of caddy, this is something that shows up in my work sometimes. I'm interested in language, and I think titles are really hard. I'm sure a lot of other artists feel this way too. Sometimes the titles come before the work or as it's coming together, and then sometimes they come later. But I'm definitely interested in using titles as kind of clues to what's happening. And in my work, I'm often trying to break down boundaries between kind of human bodies and creatures and the natural world, and kind of stitching all these things together, and also kind of commenting on the way that people are sometimes categorized. And oh my gosh, somebody just put up this picture of a lizard. I really like it. Anyway, so I like the idea of also women being referred to as catty is kind of a, derogatory term, but it's also like a kind of to I don't know, there's just something interesting to me about that, or when people are referred to as foxy, or like with these animal terms, and also thinking about calico cats and calico patterns, and that kind of pattern that's often found in the home. They're just like, feel like there are all these connections with language and the way that we talk about these things. Anyway, you can go to
Find catty very pointy, so there's an attitude there, and also kind of rude because it's obviously walking away from the conversation. So I my favorites, as so many are, but we will move on. Maybe. Why aren't we moving on? And now?
Yeah. This is mermaid. Yeah. So again, it's a kind of similar ideas about the standing sculptures, and this one I wanted to occupy kind of a lower to the ground space. The kind of end of the form, the kind of tail part kind of falls onto the ground. And I think again, like thinking about connections between bodies and creatures, and mermaids as kind of like hybrid creatures, and my sculptures as also being hybrid creatures is just something that I'm interested in. And this work also has just some kind of aquatic references in it. There's some seashells that I've stitched in. You can kind of see one of them behind this red lace. And then there's another kind of panel of green lace that just made me think of moss and mossy rocks and seaweed. I don't know. So just those kinds of references were in it for me. Yeah.
I didn't mention this before, but if anybody has a question, we're not really waiting for questions at the end. You can unmute, just ask your question. So please feel free as we go through.
Feel free to interrupt me as I'm rambling about things.
No, not though. Are these, since you're going aquatic, are these somewhat gill-like features, something that's kind of breathing?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely. And I think I sometimes hesitate to say explicitly what I think is happening in certain places, but there's a kind of gill or like flipper kind of thing. And this one kind of in the middle of the sculpture, it's actually it's a sleeve cuff, and I use cuffs a lot in my work because I think there's something about them that's so evocative. I mean, we have them all our clothing, and they are kind of like these openings. They kind of show where the body it goes in or comes out, and they have kind of a biological connotation to me, and as well as like sometimes I will put a bunch of them kind of together, clustering them, and I don't know, I use them as kind of a visual tool, and sometimes I put things going through them or use them as more negative space, kind of frames for negative space. Yeah.
An interesting element.
Mhm.
When your work first was sent to me as images, I thought this was, 6 feet tall. And it's not, it's 3 feet tall. And with the name introvert, I certainly relate to this sense of it just holding in tight. So that's my interpretation and what I'm seeing here.
I love that. And that is definitely something that is very present in this piece. I made this piece in like May of 2020, which was a hard time for everybody. And I don't know. I think that maybe that's all I will say about this one, but I am really attached to it. And I think, and I've shown it a few times in different spaces, and yeah, it's a special one for me too.
Let's see who's next.
Yeah, this one is arm in arm, and it's my largest sculpture, but it just barely still fits in my car. So I was able to bring it to the exhibition. And it is called Arm in Arm because the process of making it involved a lot of kind of moving my body around to mimic the sculpture, and resulted in a lot of twisting my arms through the negative spaces and actually kind of embracing it at different times. And it felt just like this new level of engagement with building something on this new scale. And yeah, so I have a
Doesn't show the negative spaces clearly, but they do wind through places where you do see directly through. So that frames out different parts of it as you kind of look it up and down and see what it wants. So
yeah, and I think something I was thinking about a lot as I was putting together this exhibition and installing it was the way that certain of my works can become frames for other ones, or frames for the space, and that you can look through some of them at other ones. So this is one that has that kind of capacity too.
and I do like the way your pieces hold their space. Like
yeah. This is actually, sorry.
She's a little different in composition, isn't she?
Yeah, and she's actually, I think, the oldest piece that's in this show. So she's from 2019, and I made this sculpture when I was an artist in residence at Vermont Studio Center. And that was such a generative residency for me. I was trying lots of new things, and something that I started to do that I'd done a little bit but hadn't so much until I was there was starting to paint on my forms. So if I made a form that I was happy with the shape, but maybe not so much with the color palette or the composition of fabrics, I would start to paint on top of them, either in sections, or like this one, I painted the entire thing, and then I went back in and painted these flowers. And I think the idea of engaging in the language of floral fabric, which is something that's really present in my work, but kind of taking ownership over it and creating my own pattern and creating my own composition and rendering it in my own kind of imperfect hand, felt like this exciting thing, and it's something that I'm still investigating. And there's a couple other pieces in the show that incorporate paint, but this is one of the ones that has the most paint.
And now, what is on the mantle?
So I love this mantle, and when I was looking, when I was looking at images of the space, I'm always so excited by the prospect of engaging the specificity of a gallery space. And one of the things that I was really excited about was the mantle, because I like going back to my kind of semi-pedestal aversion. I think it was this really great organic way of introducing works at a certain height that felt really like intrinsic to the space. And also because I think so much about the home, and my works are engaged with kind of the objects and the furniture and the other parts of the home. The idea of like I have a mantle in my house, and I think it's something that a lot of people have familiarity with in their homes. And you have like, I put a lot of stuff on my mantle at home. It's like kind of this natural tendency of a place to display objects. And I don't know, I just liked the idea of playing around with that. So I put some of my smaller sculptures up here. And I was also excited, like this one on the right that has kind of these strings falling out of it. I was excited to play with that on the mantle, and I wanted to have a variety of works that were different kind of heights and shapes, to keep that. I wanted this part to be dynamic too. I wanted every part of the room to feel considered.
Very considered, and I popped this up first because I then wanted to introduce Leggy Daisy after Daisy, because she's odd, but she still has her daisies.
Yeah, she is odd. I think that I often am I'm interested in approaching the line of, or the region of things that are unsettling, but then kind of covering them in flowers or doing some other gesture that makes them feel approachable. And I think that is an interesting conversation for me, to kind of be able to talk about things that are maybe more unsettling, or create forms that are kind of strange, but then using these kind of modest patterns or dainty patterns or kind of comfortable colors that make you feel other things, the way that they can work in concert with each other it feels like this generative thing to me. So yeah, but yes, it's definitely a different one. And it has, this one is has polymer clay, kind of creating some of the armature, but then there's also fabric that I've painted to kind of blend the armature in with the sculpted fabric form, so they're all kind of brought together.
Yeah, she brings a little bit of conflict and challenge, but then once you get to know her, she's good.
Isn't that always the way? Yeah, this one is I think a similar kind of thing, where it's a kind of a weird shape, and it is a shape that just kind of, the ceramic shape was something that kind of just came to me, and I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I don't want to say too much about this one, but I like the oddness of it. And I think also I like being able to create work at all different scales and to have them, I think this is the smallest work in the show, and I think that it still has a connection to Arm in Arm, which is the largest work in the show, and that they occupy such different spaces that you relate to them so differently, but they're still kind of about similar things, but in different languages. And I think the way that we relate to objects like this, there's just such a sweetness and intimacy to our relationship with like our small beloved objects. But I also want to be able to give them their own kind of strangeness as well.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, I hadn't thought about the relationship of the sizes much, but it's definitely part of what your work is about, especially all together, seen all together.
And I think it's interesting, like what you were saying, and maybe for folks that are watching this that haven't seen the exhibition, you can't always tell how big the work or how small the work is from the photos. And sometimes when people see the work in person, it's often either a lot larger or a lot smaller than they expected it to be. And it is kind of interesting to me. It's like this magic trick that happens of you see something in an image and you think you know what it is, and then you see it in person and you realize that you didn't, or you had your own idea of what it was, but it wasn't the same.
Yeah. Good point about your show as well, with everything you know, put into space very consciously of where everything would be. So we're moving on, so to speak, to the suspended pieces.
Yeah. So speaking of the installation, I really, with this show, it was important to me to occupy every space of the gallery. And one of the ways that I wanted to do that was by having works that were suspended from the ceiling at different heights so that they were filling the space and also sometimes interrupting the space, that they might be hung low enough that they would interrupt your walk through the space, so encouraging you to stop and pause, and then also to be able to engage with the other works, to gesture towards them, to feel like they were all existing in the same plane together, was important to me. And I was specifically also thinking a lot about personal memories that I have of visiting my great-grandmother. And she had this porch that it was like a windowed, like a three season porch. And she had all of these things that were hung from the ceiling. And I know from talking to my parents that I have embellished my memories of this, but to me, that's also what this is kind of all about. And in my mind, she had all of these just like amazing things hanging from the ceiling, like bird cages and plants and like light fixtures, and that there was just this kind of like menagerie of things in there, and just like a mixture of things of all different textures and colors. And that was something that I wanted to consider with the hanging works. And I also, something that has taken hold of me the last couple of years, that was kind of my one of my pandemic things that I became connected to, was houseplants. It wasn't something that I was super interested in before, but now I'm very connected to my houseplants, and I have some that are also suspended. And I think that they've kind of been creeping their way into my work as well, at the idea of watching them grow, the way that they grow and extend and make new leaves and unfurl, and the way they hang and their tendrils have gravity, but then sometimes they grow up. I spend a lot of time just kind of looking at them. And I think that they've definitely made themselves known in my practice. So yeah, that's what I'll say about this one too. This one also has plant language.
And I love the ceramic that seems to be, well, again, this is me saying it seems to be something organic and something that has probably decomposed a little bit in its evolution, and then this green plant, snake, whatever is starting to either make a home or overcome. Yeah, it's another beautiful piece.
Oh, thanks. I love what you said about it. Maybe I'll leave it there. I love that image.
Oh, okay. And it's airy. So it's, ace is literally a suspended root.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go along, see who's next. Attachment in the picture I took looks like it's hitting Mermaid in the face, which is not my attention. If you haven't been to the show, this is on the floor, probably 4 feet from this suspended piece. So it was an unfortunate optical illusion, but this piece does have such an interesting layering in that there's, a start, or is this the start? Do you start here and look, or do you go up? You have the options.
You have the options. Yeah, I think with this piece, I was thinking about kind of attachment, and both kind of literally, physically in the construction of it, and the idea of attachments that we have to things. Yeah, and I think in my work, there's this, in the exhibition, each work has kind of, as we've been going through, like a distinct kind of personality or idea behind it, but they also all come together to create kind of like a cohesive, I hope, body, like a body politic. They're all kind of together. So I think with this one, the idea of having 2 pieces that almost seemed like they were separate at one time, then joined, or maybe they are currently joined, but maybe they'll be separate at another time. I thought that was interesting, that's kind of like this narrative of these 2 pieces. And yeah,
And this
that's
one, it just occurred to me, I didn't check, but now, this piece is so close to the ceiling, and I think it is the one that's highest in
Mhm.
relationship to the ceiling, which of course does add a kind of tension to the separation. Who's holding who up, you know? And this fabric really stands out in the palette of other patterns and designs. Is this, I could go over and touch it, but I'm not going to. Tell me about this fabric. Is it very thick, very thin? Because some of your pieces
Mhm.
make thin fabric look thick and thick, so, but this is so different. It's almost like a doorway to something.
Yeah, it's the fabric itself it's like a thin cotton. I think it's like an eyelet fabric that has these perforations in it that are then stitched over. I did not do the stitching on the fabric. That was something that was on the found fabric. But I just loved the way that it looked, that it had these negative spaces in it, that it had this depth to it. And I think this particular fabric I got from this place called Fab Scrap, which is an amazing resource. They have locations in Brooklyn and in Philadelphia. I've been to the one in Brooklyn, but it's a place where a lot of waste from the fashion industry ends up, and you can go and sort through just like enormous bins of fabric sorted by color. And they also have yardage and things too. That's all sold by the pound. And it's just like, it's a pretty amazing place. You're just like treasure hunting, but it does also mean that you can find, I think that this piece of fabric itself wasn't much larger than what I used. It was small, which for my purposes is nice because I get to have these moments of like, okay, I have this like precious, whatever it is, 8 inches by 8 inches or 1 foot by 1 foot piece of fabric. It's so small, but like I have to be really choosy about how I incorporate it, and I want it to have meaning, and I want it to have its moment to shine. So thank you for pointing it out.
Thing about it just jumps out, and it's reminding me of something somebody asked, I think the night of the opening, but I didn't ask you, so I couldn't answer their question right then. But the question was, are there any, in any of the pieces, is there fabric that's also in another piece? There
Yeah,
is. Okay, because
definitely.
I know it'd be almost impossible to find unless you were you and knew where things were.
There definitely is.
Mhm.
I'm seeing some of it in this picture,
Okay, that's so good.
but I also, I mean, I have knowledge of it, so I know.
Right.
And
Yeah,
um,
that's what I'm thinking, but it would be so fun to scavenger hunt around the room because it
well,
gives a relationship between the pieces.
I can tell you that because I think also it's interesting, like thinking about how in a painting that there are some paintings that have certain of the same colors, but the paintings themselves have really different palettes. I think that some of my pieces might use the same fabric, but the pieces themselves, not only do they look different, but the color palette of the piece might be really different. But in this picture, I can tell you that the piece attachment has this kind of stripy fabric at the top of the bottom piece. It's hard to describe, but it's like a pink and blue stripy fabric. And there's this sculpture that's behind it on the right called Balancing Act that also has that same fabric in it. That's the blue and pink stripes. So there's one, but I'm sure there are many, many others.
Oh, because it was just mind-boggling to think that there wasn't. So, so now I'm not mind-boggled because it makes sense. Okay, let's see who's next. The titular piece of the show, Jog Your Memory.
Yeah, the titular Jog Your Memory. I think that jog your memory is such an interesting phrase that I've been thinking about a lot and playing around with. And the idea of how the way that we access memory or the way that it's accessed for us. And with this piece, I was thinking about the way that sometimes when you walk into a space or you see something, it just sparks memory for you. And the idea of the sculpture that's kind of like presenting all of these different things to be like, does this jog your memory? Does this jog your memory? And a lot of these things, I mean, all of these things jog my memory because they all came from things that I had in my studio or earlier in my life. And I have these relationships with them, and then I put them together. But I think also, I hope that there's, even though the viewer's relationship is different, I think that there is this feeling of something foreign, but something familiar. And I just liked the idea of this kind of, I don't know, the sculpture that was presenting all of these items to you as this kind of opportunity to think about if they reminded you of something, which is kind of the idea of the show in a way. It's one of the ideas. So that's what I'll say about that.
And I like how it's a suspended piece, and it also has little suspended pieces coming off of it. And it's such an interesting figure when you look at it like this. And of course, more than one visitor has said, oh, it's like a baby's mobile, because it comes off in so many directions and with hanging things anyway. That does add to its charm, that it brings that memory or that, that playful quality to it.
Totally.
Okay. Now we are on wall pieces
All pieces.
called Flutter and Ache.
Yeah, this is a sorry.
Just the way everything is pulling together. There's tension and yet there's not. I don't, this is a lovely piece.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think like kind of literally in my work, things are stuffed pretty densely, and when they're when I incorporate the ceramics, they are kind of, there's like a tension, like a push and pull, where it is kind of although they are soft and squishy, they are also kind of tense in a way. And yeah, this is kind of a tender piece. I don't know exactly what I want to say about it, but it is one that is dear to me.
Yeah, it has such a sense of being a rib cage
Mhm.
and holding something in. But
Mhm.
the other thing about all of these pieces, which I seem to have plenty to say about just because of my appreciation of the work and just how serious and whimsical it is, that it's really all about expectations. And so I have
Mhm.
had visitors who've come in, as I mentioned to you before we started. Oftentimes people do come in as just curious about what's in here or thinking they're coming into the history museum, but people have come into this show, and with people who aren't used to going to galleries, there's usually a pause as they look around. But one couple came in and they looked at everything and they were laughing, but not laughing at the work. They were laughing because they were getting the work, and it just delighted them. They talked about all kinds of things that it reminded them of. And when they left, they said, this stuff is so far outside our wheelhouse, but we had a great time. So what more can be said about an
Yeah,
exhibition?
that's what it's all about. Thank you for sharing that.
That's that, and I've told you, we've had lots and lots of positive comments, no negative comments. Not that I would tell you if we did, but I might tell you privately. But
Well, it would also be okay. I mean, as artists, I think we all expect,
Right.
you make things that are interesting to you and you hope are interesting to others, but
Absolutely. And
if
it's
you
all
made
about,
something that everyone would like, it wouldn't be very interesting.
and that's why I mentioned people have to be just have their mind open, their heart open when they come, and this seems to be pulling that out of people, which
I
is
love
nice.
to hear that. And I think that I try to like, oh, this one is called something different.
Oh,
Which is fine.
solar plexus. I didn't
Solar plexus is the hanging one that has like a yellow ceramic piece in the middle.
You had to
But
say that. You couldn't just say, oh yeah, this is
I'm
no.
sorry.
Oh, no, I'm just kidding, because I did have a
Um,
little challenge numbering things.
Totally.
So
The titles are not always so clear of they're sometimes, because I think about titles as like, well, if you're going to call it something, you want it to also be something that is introducing a new element, which means that they're not necessarily always called like purple thing on the floor or
what is this title? I
this
am
one
sorry.
is called Tangled Vines.
Oh,
Uh,
of course. Well,
yeah.
tell us about Tangled Vines then.
Tangled Vines. So this one, and so the materials are slightly different. It actually has it's a found steel armature, and that I have coated in fabric and various kinds of mediums. That's kind of like holding the shape up, and then there's a soft, twisty form that's weaving in and out of the metal shape. And I was thinking about both, again, kind of rib cages and bones, but also trellises. And I think about trellises a lot, and trying to train, the idea of training vines to grow a certain way is interesting to me. And then also the idea of them as a trellis, as a kind of armature, and then the organic matter as the flesh that's covering it, and then maybe is burdening it. Yeah, that's
Well,
what I'll say.
butter and egg, I like how they intertwines, the soft and the hard.
Yeah, and again, it's exactly what you said, like they're in concert with each other, but is one of them pulling the other one? Is one of them pushing the other one? Or are they just kind of connected and static?
I like the idea of the trellis, something just growing up into it.
Mhm.
This piece, because to see something designed specifically to hang in the corner of a gallery is something very interesting, as you can see.
Yeah, I love corners. And as I was saying, how I like to engage the specificity of the space, I love to put things in corners, and I've done it a lot in different kinds of ways. And I don't know, I'm like obsessed with the corner of a room and looking at the corner of my room right now. And the way that when you put something there, it like similar to talking about the hard and soft forms, there's this interplay of like the corner and the piece of like, is the corner squishing it or is the corner being pushed out? But of course, that it's the corner of the wall. It's not actually moving, but it feels like it is. It's either like swooshing in or smooshing out.
It makes the corner, which is usually not particularly aesthetic part of a room, just is the corner, but rarely decorated. And that's why I find it very interesting how a small piece holds that wall now, because it's in the corner.
Yeah, I think they deserve to be decorated. I think that that's also like something I think about a lot with my work, using either literal objects that are from kind of often ignored aspects of the home, or putting things or drawing visual references from these aspects of the home that we don't always think about, or of our bodies or whatever, kind of giving them their moment to be adorned is something that I think about.
And is it disappearing into the corner or oozing out of the corner? I just find it fascinating. So let's move on to some more wall work. I thought the exhibition pieces were next, but this is more ceramic.
Yeah, this is another one that has a ceramic form. So I started with the ceramic form and then I built the soft form afterwards. And when I work in ceramic, I often don't know exactly what I'm going to build after I've fired it. I just like the idea of kind of leaving things open for me to come back and creating negative spaces so that I can weave things in and out and smoosh things in. So this one, actually, the soft form went through a couple iterations. I tried a couple different things with the ceramic form. And I'm happy with this current iteration, but you never know. I might change my mind, but for right now, I'm happy with it.
Well, I also liked a lot of the things you said at the opening about, and I know many artists work this way, that you don't have a goal, you let it evolve. And as you say, things might change in the midst of working on something, but it always finds its way. This is a good example of that. And
Yeah, I do believe that. And that was also kind of how I approached installing the show. Because I knew I had looked at the floor plans of the gallery and I knew what it looked like in pictures, and I had a sense of how much work I wanted to have there. And, as I was selecting work for the show, I had certain colors and themes in mind, knowing certain works that I wanted to have together. But you also don't really know what's going to happen until you're there. And that was really how I felt. And then once I started to put things together, it just started to make sense. I started with certain kind of vignettes of like, well, if this work goes here, then this one has to go here because they're having this conversation. And then if this one's here, well, then obviously this one goes here. And it just kind of went like that. Like it made sense to me that certain ones were engaged with certain others, and it just kind of fell together. So I think I like the idea of not always knowing and letting the work tell you what's going to happen, because I think it's
Got
like
that
the work
sense
is
doing the installation. They were in charge. They were telling.
yeah. I like the idea of like my work is smarter than I am. Like even though I made it, it knows what it wants, and I've given it autonomy so it can tell me what is supposed to happen.
And so here we have where these pieces wanted to be. We have introvert and arm in arm, far apart, because introvert wouldn't want to be arm in arm. I mean, this is totally my fake interpretations right now. But you know, we have aerial root, and this guy whose name I can't remember.
Attachment.
That's attachment. I for
Yeah.
some reason wanted to say arrangement, but that's not right. And
I know.
then,
I also have a work that's called detachment, and that's why I first said that.
and then this guy in the window. Oh, there's more attachment. It's a larger piece of the optical illusion, which you can see here. Oh no, the one before. This is how far apart they are. And yet in that photograph, it looks like they're touching noses. So going back or keep going forward. Now, oh, it's a good close-up of that fabric. Here, like that. And no, they're doing it again. And I mean, putting things on the windowsill, that makes them so real. I don't know why.
Yeah,
what the light does to the color and all of that.
I was pretty delighted to put things on those windowsills. They just also felt like these built-in places for work to go, and also the view out the windows of the gallery is so beautiful. I was like looking out the window as I was installing, and I was thinking, well, of course I would put something in the window because my work also wants to look out the window.
And it's blue, just like the view. And here we are. Thank you so much. Now we certainly can take questions at this point. Jenny. Yeah, Jenny, I see you.
I was clapping.
Oh, you were
But
clapping.
I'll say something anyway. Just Anna, I really appreciate you sharing your work with our community. It's incredibly interesting and fascinating. So I hope many people come see the exhibit. And I especially love the way that you activated the square space with the placement of your pieces. And it's just been a delight to be part of.
Thank you so much, Jenny. That means a lot. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Anyone else? I second the round of applause, and
could I just say something?
Of course.
Okay, this is Sam the salamander in the viewpoint here. I just wanted to say that it's delightful to see how much fun you're having in displaying your work, and what a jovial person you are, and clearly, I mean, you're the kind of artist who loves what they're doing and appreciates the funness of it all. I had a question about your choice of materials. It just seems to me that you've been so diverse in joining different things together. I'm wondering if you've thought about using goopy stuff.
Goopy stuff.
Well, I'm just thinking that Vicky Palermo has made these pieces out of this Jello-like stuff, and I'm just wondering if you had a chat with her, and if you might want to try to incorporate goopiness in some of your forms.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I think maybe goopiness is there somewhere down the line. I think that when I introduce new materials, I am very gradual about it. And I think I would have to investigate the way that the goopiness would interact with the existing stuff, whether it would be kind of a more exterior element or a new thing entirely. But I love the idea of thinking about that. And I guess I was thinking, well, ceramic, I mean, you fire it so it's not goopy anymore, but it does have a goopy quality when you're working with it, and it can have a goopy visual. But yeah, I feel like I just have, and thank you so much for saying that. I do love making things. It's just like the best. And I feel like I just have so many ideas that I want to try. I don't think I'm ever going to run out. And I think material exploration is so exciting and fun. So yeah, I am sure I will be trying something goopy down the line.
Okay, jello-y, maybe that's the better word rather than goopy. Anyway, thanks very much. I really enjoyed your show, and I agree that using corners is something. You know, utilizing that space was very special. I was immediately drawn to that work. Anyway, good luck with it. Good luck with it all. I'm glad that you're young and exciting and excited. And, you know, as almost a human fossil, I appreciate everything you're doing.
That's really nice. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
I'm looking in the chat for any possible written question, and there is a message. It's from Tanya saying, Hannah, this was wonderful. Thank you so much. And that's nice.
That is so nice.
Are there questions, more questions? I don't know.
It's just Laura chiming in again. And I just thought Sam's response was very interesting, because Hannah should know that Sam's a scientist and he works with a lot of goopy material. He's also an artist, and he's very, so it's just his response to your work is interesting. But I think that I don't know why he's getting goopy, but I just think there's something so playful about your work, and you and June touched on it. It's playful, but yet it's very serious, and the whole idea of jog your memory and the rib cage. I feel the human anatomy in your work, and sometimes it's really uncomfortable, like that dancing thing on the mantle. I'm like, is that from Alien? I don't know. I mean, but it's beautiful and playful, and there's daisies on it, and I just, and that's art, right? Like it's jogging your memory. It's making references to the dark side, to the joyful side, and making you think differently. And I mean, I'm just trying to get a little bit in the last minute or so, but I love your work. It's so interesting. And it takes me places that I love to go, because it challenges me, and it makes me think, and it makes me feel. So thank you. It's been great. And June, this has been great. And I just, one more thing I want to say. I'm so glad that you guys are doing this, because even though Zoom doesn't have the same kind of attention that it used to have during the height of the pandemic, this is a video that people can see later. So, I know many people, I go back to these things, so they're online and people will see them. They just don't schedule their life around this stuff anymore. But it's great to have this talk online. So thank you, Hannah, for doing this, and June for doing this. It's really, really special. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. That's so great to hear. And I totally agree. I think like having these things for posterity so that people can look back on them or engage with them whenever they're able to is so great. And we didn't even get into like pop culture references, but I am kind of a movie, sci-fi, and occasional horror movie fan. So there is some of that going on there as well. So, but that's another conversation.
Oh yeah, I can see it. That's great. That's so
Yeah.
good. I am too. Totally.
Excellent. It's the right time of year for it too.
Thank you, Laura. You said something that, a phrase I've used before describing art, and that it makes you see things differently. And so when you encounter it, whether you're the people for whom it was not their wheelhouse, but they left, now they have this memory. It's the goal to see things differently. And yeah, so thank you. And Brooke says what Laura said. So all wonderful comments. So having finished, I wanted to leave everyone with first want to close this, but that didn't work. Okay, go away. Anyway, I wanted to leave people with your website to see work as you post it, to see where you'll be adding to your extensive exhibition list of past and future exhibitions. And please share this with friends. And please share that the video will be up, and it's a video within a video. So you get, two for the price of one. I will say good night. And I look forward to seeing you in November, although I do not look forward to seeing these go home.
Oh.
I will miss them. As I
Oh.
said, every morning I come in and open the door and expect them all to just say, hi, hi, hi. Because they're just, well, except for Caddy, she doesn't say much. So anyway, we'll leave it there, and thank you.
Thank you so much. This was so great. I'm so happy to have the work there, and glad that you're there to say hello to it.
Yes, yes. So we will see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Bye. Oh, late guest. Who's the mystery late guest? I'll never know. Okay.